So this is my testimony of Jesus Christ and what he's done in my life. And first of all, this little bit, Dana, this is for you. And if I don't know if you say Dana. I'm saying Dana, so the way I'm saying that, I'm hoping it's Dana Smith. So it was like the last message you've sent, so the next message I'll send you, it'll be to tell you, sorry for not replying, because you sent me a message that I've not replied to. But obviously I'll probably send you a message before you see the video, apologising for it anyway, but anyway, there's a second apology, this one, I suppose. But I had replied to you, I typed out something, and I thought, what I've actually just typed to you here. So what I began to type was my testimony. So I began, saying, like, I've got it in, hang it, I'll open it up and see. So I began saying, I don't have any wisdom or knowledge, because I think you had said, I've missed like your advice and stuff like that. So, and obviously I appreciate that. Like, I appreciate that you listen to me. Sometimes we don't even do that, and I'm not talking about you. Or, I mean, like, sometimes someone might tell me something and I don't actually listen. So it's nice that someone actually listens. But my point was kind of like, I don't have wisdom or knowledge. God does, and he shares it with us. But sometimes the truth is painful. And then I went for example, and then I was getting into this, story when I was younger. And then I went off on a wee tangent, and I eventually got into asked myself, I'm just kind of sharing my testimony, and it's something that I've not shared publicly as my testimony. I've told one or two people bits and parts of it, but I've not went a run through of my testimony. So this is what this is going to be about. But what I just wanted to add that wee bit in the start. Well, I'll edit out the public one because it's not like the video that everyone will see won't be a personal one to someone. It will just be like, But so yeah, it was just to say thank you. You know what I mean, for I suppose one of my points was going to be, I've wanted to do this for 3 years, just over 3 years now, and I've never done it. I've never actually. I don't know, like a large part of it is what I was going to speak in that message again, was when I got saved, I didn't do the right things after that, and so I actually fell back. I went back the way instead of moving forward, and so that obviously brought its own issues, and I'll speak about that kind of later on. But so this is going to be a video on my testimony of how I came to know Jesus, or I like to see it as in how Jesus came to me, because I know people say I found God or I found Jesus, and in a way it's like, well, I could see, sometimes just having a mind where you're thinking things through the time. I was like it as like, well, I've not found Jesus, because I wasn't looking for Jesus, I wasn't looking for God. Jesus found me, and it's crazy. So we'll start off by saying thank you for anyone that's watching this, and I'm going to just assume if it's not someone that I've sent it to, like for example, if I'll put a link up, maybe OneDrive or something, because I doubt I'll be able to send it. If I'm sending a link to someone, then obviously thanks if you watch it. I know a lot of people that I'll send this to I've known from my past. I want to send it to everyone, because personally there's nothing more important than to know why we're here, where we're going, why, all these questions that we have that never seem to get answered, and also to realise that our interpretation or our understanding of what the Bible is and all that stuff, and it's not bad news, it's good news. And it was only recently that I really found that out for myself. And so yeah, thank you if you watch it, and I hope that it inspires you, it gives you hope, because I know that I didn't have any, certainly not from going to church and all that stuff. I'll get into that as well. So if you're wondering what is a testimony, a testimony, my understanding is, if it's say for example I'm a professional footballer and I'm retiring, if I'm giving my testimony, what that would be is I'm giving my beliefs, my experiences, my thoughts, from my career, kind of highlights from beginning to end, and that's my testimony kind of thing. So it's kind of similar my testimony of Jesus, and that it's my testimony of what Jesus has done in my life, even when I didn't see it, and giving me the kind of highlights in my life. And of course, a part of not wanting to, share testimonies is people tell you this. It's you see a lot of them, so people can easily think, oh, it's just a bombardment of people, spilling out their feelings. But I can assure you that, for example, from me, and even from watching other people's testimonials, that they're not comfortable with it. It's people are sharing a lot of things that hurt them, and that they probably wouldn't even have shared with their doctors, their psychologists, their parents, their friends. But this is how important testimony is, to show other people that there is a light, and what the experiences and changes have came about. Right, so my name's Jordan McEwen, and I am just not long turned 27. So I stay in Scotland. I don't know why I'm saying all this. This is what I've seen in other testimonials, I suppose. But so I grew up in Scotland. I've got two older brothers, and so let's just say that when I was young, my mum and my brothers, they had, and to be fair, my mum's kind of side of the family for the most part had learning difficulties and learning disabilities, which made it, it made life, I don't want to say it made life just blatantly difficult for them, and that I don't want to make them seem incapable, because they're very capable of doing things, of having conversations, of having relationships. It's just the social culture that we're in and what's expected of people. It really pushes people with learning disabilities out. Not just people, but obviously I'm speaking in terms of these. I'm not trying to say that no one else is, but it really pushes people like them down, because it's like, well, you're not intelligent if you can't do maths quickly, because there's no jobs that will take you unless you can do those things. But there's plenty of things that people could be doing. There's plenty. Everyone can be useful in their own way. You know what I mean? But so obviously, but in terms of relationships and stuff like that, it was quite hectic. Let's just say, growing up, it was. You've got three boys, and they've all got their own kind of issues. Like for example, me, I didn't have any like mental issues. I was just really probably excited, and obviously having my two older brothers, and we don't have much rules or stuff like that. And my mum was herself, so she was doing it all herself. And see, this is what hindsight is a great thing, but it can also fill you with regret, because I didn't realise how awesome my mum had been, dealing with all her problems. And it's not like my mum, not the person to sit there and wallow in her problems and go, I've got like the way I would, you know what I mean? Like later on in life, I'd be sitting in my problems and going, oh, why this, why that, all this. My mum had all these barriers for her life, and she never sat and wallowed in them. And so I was about 7, my middle brother was about 9, and my oldest brother was about 12 when we got put into foster care. So that was 12 years that my mum had at least one child, and for about 7 years she had 3. That's great, man. I don't know how she done it. Of course, to the latter end of those, she had some help, home carers and stuff like that. But I think it's great, man. People, and we weren't easy. I was following what my older brothers were doing. They were getting into, maybe trouble, stuff like that all the time. We were hanging out with the wrong crowds. My brothers also dealt with getting bullied and stuff like that. And we didn't have a father figure either. You know what I mean? So it was tough. Not on me. I just mean it was a tough situation that I don't think anyone really realised. But one day, I was in primary 3. I was 7-year-old, and this was like news to me. I'm in class and get told that I have to go to the I don't know what you call them. Is it head teacher? I don't know if it's head teacher at primary school, if it's principal. I don't know. But that person, the one that's in charge of the school, went to their office, and they were giving me a bat, like a sticker, ripping a sticker off it. All I remember is it had a frog on it, or a toad or something, and it said star people or something like that. And they were sticking that on my shirt, and they were saying, you know, basically that I'm going to be leaving, good luck and all that stuff. And my social worker was there, and so my social worker took me out. I remember the names. I won't mention the names, of course, but the two of them led me out into the car, and I'm thinking, you know, what's happening? Where are we going? And they wouldn't tell me. They said, oh, we'll find out when you get there. And I get into the car, and I'm sitting in the back, and we start driving, and I'm just thinking, you know, where are we going? Like, this is weird. They won't tell me where we're going. And I noticed, you know, the bags of crisps, multi-pack crisps and sweets, and oh, help yourself to some crisps and all that. And I'm like, okay, but where are we going? You know, oh, we'll see when we get there. And we come into a village called Coylton. It was maybe a 10-15 minute drive, most probably 10. And we pull up to a house, and obviously I've never been here, so it's all new to me. And I just feel so uneasy. I'm like, I don't understand what's happening here, but you know, let's go. So we go up to the house, and they knock the door, and the fact that I'm there with them at the door, I think, I'm 7-year-old, but the feelings, it wasn't right. Like, why am I at this door? If this was for them, I would be in the car, you know what I mean, waiting. And we go in, and we sit down, and I'm sitting, like, we walk in, I'm sitting at the patio door at the farthest end of the living room, facing them, and they're standing up, the two social workers, and this guy and the woman are sitting over on that couch. And then that's when the bomb drops. You know, they're like, so, you know, this is Sandra, and this is David. These are going to be your new family. And you know, it's like, see, for me to even say that without just tearing up and getting upset, like, that's how far I've come. Like, my whole life, even as an adult, like, I would cry just because of the weight that carried with me in my mind and in my memory. It's hard to describe, and the thing that catches me is I'd hate knowing what I felt. I'd hate anyone else to feel that. Like, I felt like I'd just been lured into a trap. The gate had got closed, and it was just like, oh, this is a trap, by the way, you're not getting out. And that's nowhere near it. Like, this is your new family. The first thing that went through my head is, oh, what about my mum? What about my brothers? But I couldn't talk. I froze. I wasn't saying any of this anymore. I just completely froze. Tears, you know. And then I was silent, and I actually don't think that I spoke for 2 or 3 days. The only communicating I done was just, you know, shaking my head or nodding. I was just in that much shock. And the social workers only stayed there for about, you know, 10 or 15 minutes. Then they said, you know, we have to go get your brothers from school. And then in that moment I was like, because I hadn't even thought about that, I was like, where are they going to be going? They're obviously not coming here, are they? Then they didn't. We all get split up. And yeah, but I can't describe with words what that felt like. And that experience shaped my life. That is the first time, and not in that moment, that is the first time I know how, that is the first time I ever experienced resentment. And the funny thing is, well, it's not funny, but I didn't experience that resentment for at least 5 to 10 years. But it didn't begin when I first felt it. It began there, in that moment, in that experience. That's when the resentment began, and it came to fruition just all these years later. Just this resentment of how could they do that to me? How could they do that to me? How can you actually do that to me? And I just had this resentment for what I was in, which was foster care, for the kind of people that would do that to me. Not everyone in general. It's not like I hated social workers, although I did not like it, you know what I mean? But yeah, the only thing that got me talking was a few days later. They were like, you know what, how would you like to go to the zoo? You know, that's when I began talking. But I smiled a long time before that. In fact, that very hour that I went into that house, when I was crying, and by the time that they had left, obviously I'd put my head into my knees, and I really didn't want to move. I didn't want to be comfortable there, because it's weird when you're telling a 7-year-old this is your new family. Like, what do you mean? I only know family as in my mum and my brothers, my gran. So how can you say this is my family? And look, what I really wish is that I chose a different direction, because, and only God brought this clarity to me. I could have been a psychologist or a social worker or just something through all this if I knew God before it. I couldn't have done it myself, not through the resentment, because I had resentment and regret and pain and anger, so I couldn't have done it with all that. But I could have done it if I'd met God, because it was only when I met God that all of that stuff just pew. And like, that might seem like, oh, that's good. It's not. That is reality, man. I can't get rid of that anger that I had, that trauma, that pain, that resentment. That was with me until I die, and if anyone tried to take that away from me, I was like, you back the feck off, man. Like, seriously, back off. You've got no right to try and justify this shit in front of me. Like, and I'll tell you that. You back the fuck off. So see, for God to come into my life at a time where, by the way, I hated God if he did exist, and remove that from me, justify all that in front of me, and make it not okay what happened, but that you actually brought good out of it and intended to, and that this is here for everyone that will humble themselves. Like, it's a miracle, man. It really is. And I only wish I knew God sooner. I really do. But free will has its consequences, and so I smiled because they had a big golden retriever, big fluffy thing, and it, you know, it kept coming up and, you know, kind of just sitting at me, and then it eventually just put his wee head, and it kind of like, not too you know, rough, just kind of like his wee nose in between my arm. And I remember just going like this and kind of opening up and just letting his wee nose come in, and just rested his nose in there, and that's when I opened up a wee bit just to cuddle him. Cried a lot more because I was like, well, I've got a friend, and then obviously that made me feel a lot better. And yeah, but we're humans and we get on with things. But of course, I get contact then with my mum twice a year. They didn't want it to be more because how upset I was getting every time I'd see her, so we reduced it from 4 to 2 times a month, and I'd see my brothers between 4 and 6 times a year, and it was the best times, obviously. Now, school, and I hated it. I freaking hated it, man. Well, over time I get used to it, obviously, but by the time that I'd done with it all, I'd been to, let's see, so I think I don't know specifically. Maybe five or six schools. So it was about two primary schools and 3 secondary, or 3 and 3, something like that. You know, so it was kind of, I didn't really build like friendships, you know, that lasted. And the thing with foster care is, and I don't know if this was right. So let's say, for example, right. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So I was with at least 6 or 7 foster carers and respites. 2 of them were Roman Catholic families that went to church and stuff like that. But in general, you know, foster care, you're not going to have the kind of freedom that you have, say, with your normal family. And that's not to say that every family's like, go out and do what you want wherever you want, of course not. But my point is, if you want to go to someone's house in foster care, they first of all need to know that you're in foster care. And then their parents, they need to know who their parents are, whether they're in trouble, whether there's warrants out for them, you know, who they know, all that kind of stuff. What about the son or the daughter? They need to know things, because they need, and you can understand why, you know what I mean, because they need to know, because look, it's a council's responsibility for you now. So they need to know who you're seeing, you know, how long you're seeing them for, what their background is, you know, all this kind of stuff, for risk factors and that. But see, at the age that I was, I'm not thinking about all that. And I was ashamed to be in foster care. I didn't understand it. I'd never known about it. You know, when you're in these places where they're saying it's your family, but you know it's not your family. And look, you can see all this, but they're trying to be your family. But you try telling that to a 7-year-old, it doesn't make sense. You know what I mean? And this is one of the things now, like, I don't look back in resentment, but I look back in like disbelief at that, how that even happens. Like, you can't just take children away from their families just out of school one day and place them in another family and say this is your family. Like, what are you hoping to come from that? What you do is you gradually bring this in. You introduce, first of all, the concept of having another family that's not your own family. You bring about maybe wee classes on why that would even be necessary. You bring about wee classes on and all the different things. So, and for example, I didn't even know that my mum and my brothers had any problems until I was older. I never got told. Like, I didn't see, when I seen my mum and my brothers, I didn't see them having problems. Obviously, growing up, I started to notice them. And by the time they told me, obviously, I was like, well, that makes sense, yeah, but like, it's like everyone's entitled to know everything apart from you, because you think you can't handle it. It's like, well, if you expect me to handle what you done to me at 7-year-old, I think I can handle the rest. Do you know what I mean? If you want to treat me like an adult in that respect, because that's what you would do to an adult that's fully aware of what's going on, you would just take them out and take them somewhere, and, you know. But then again, you contradict that when you're in the car and you're saying, oh, well, I'm not going to tell you. Like, you obviously not, because you think I'm going to get too upset, but like, you could avoid it. So my point is, it didn't make any sense. And it causes more damage than it does good. And I totally get it. Like, I'm not deluded. You know, I'm not some whinger that doesn't take on other people's perspectives and see where, well, maybe they were thinking, yeah, I do that, trust me. Like, but, and I see that there's not a great scenario coming from taking a child at 7-year-old, or really from any age, from their family and put them in with another family. But there is mitigating circumstances or things that you can do, like not just taking them out one day without warning, placing them in another house. There's things you can do. And this happened to my other 2 brothers, and I don't know what it's like at them ages either. But it couldn't have been easy, and this is the thing, caught up in myself for all these years, and I barely ever thought about, I wonder what my mum felt when she had to make that decision. That's not easy. She couldn't, like, she must have been struggling, and I didn't see it, just running about crazy, you know what I mean? And then my brothers, they went through the exact same thing. And so foster care was weird because I couldn't make friendships. I couldn't have friendships outside school. I had one, and that was difficult, man. because it had to all be planned way in advance, and you'd only get a certain amount of time, and weird. And one person for me outside of school was enough, because I didn't like people knowing that I was in foster care. It made me feel ashamed, and you would get people would get targeted. It's not that you're special, but like anything else, if you're abnormal in any way, you're going to get picked on. And it's just the way bullying works, and I just wish that I didn't care at that age. I really do, but it's just part of growing up, I suppose, because it really did affect me, and I hated it to the point where I would make up lies. At one point I was staying with my cousins, and my foster carers were my auntie and my uncle. Obviously that's a lie, they were my foster parents, but I don't want to be known as a foster child or a foster kid. And a big pain about being in foster care is just, you're telling yourself, oh, they love you and all that, all this stuff, but then they're getting paid to look after you, and they're not your family. They're just not your family, and the whole time you just want to be with your own family. You don't feel normal, and it doesn't matter how many times they tell you they love you, it doesn't matter how many times they say this or that, it doesn't change the fact that you just want to be with your family. You want to be normal, but you can't be, and it's out with your control. No, you're 7, 8 year old, and I'm telling you, until you're 16 it's not your choice. That's an eternity away at that age. But at the same time, and this only comes through hindsight, through growing up, and a lot of it when it's been too late. So foster care was a great thing. Obviously there would have been certain things it would have been nice if they were done a different way, but for the most part foster care was great, even if I didn't act like it all the time. It was difficult. I was a difficult child. I had anger issues. I wasn't as engaging as I could have been. And if I was to go through it again, knowing what I know now, I would definitely have enjoyed it more. I would have appreciated people more. I wouldn't have been scared to have said I'm in foster care. I'm not proud of it as in like, woo, but I'm proud that that's my situation. I'm proud that my mum reached out for help or took some good advice, because I've been given opportunities. The only thing for me is I wish my mum could have had some of the opportunities that I've had. But again, that just speaks to like my mum. Like, she doesn't go on holidays. She doesn't ever complain about not going on holidays. She doesn't ask to go on holidays. She never went on holiday. Like, what's there for people like her? Nothing. We'll just give them a couple £100 extra a month, call it disability, so that everybody can point a finger and say, for fuck's sake, you lazy bastards. And what do they go and do? These people that are mentally disabled, they go and spend it on fags, and they just die faster. Yeah, great. You with a fully working brain that goes out and works a job that you don't like for your own choice, just sitting and picking and everything else that doesn't stick up for themselves, like, well done. Just great, That's just what a society needs. So yeah, I had a lot of resentment, especially, and I mean a lot of resentment for the 2 social workers that had done that to me. I hated them. I really did. I hated them. Hated them with a passion. And hate's different at different ages, Like, hate when I was like 7, 8 wasn't really the way I see hate now. It was more like a, I don't like them kind of thing. Then it turns into a hate when you're older and you're like, they are absolute, really don't like them. They can go and die. They can go to hell. That's the kind of things that I believed. And yeah, so when I was about 7 or 8 year old, so that's just after when I went into care, say maybe about 8 is when I can really remember, I'm thinking a lot. I was always thinking, like, and it's not always to my benefit, because the more you think, the more you need things to think about. And if you've not got great and interesting things to think about, you're going to think about bad things, things that bring you pain, that make you bitter, that make you lonely, that make you you know what I mean. But sometimes I'd think about things, and I'd be thinking about the world, and I'd be thinking about poverty, I'd be thinking about injustice, and I'd be thinking, why are these things happening? Like, I'm 8-year-old and I'm going, there's poverty in the world, there's people that don't have water and food, then why don't we feed them? Why don't we give them water? And that might sound, you think we wouldn't do that if we could? Obviously we're trying to do it. But no, it was deeper than that. You don't need to deeply think about giving someone that's thirsty water, but I was deeply thinking about this in a way that if these problems are so profound that we're dealing with them over decades and not getting any closer to solving them, something is seriously wrong, because the earth is not lacking in water and it's not lacking in land to produce crops. Is it lacking in water to water the crops? No, because right, so let's get one factor out of the way. These are things that I'm thinking about. Is there enough food? Yes. Is there enough water? Yes. And if we may say so, there's an abundance of both. So what's really the issue is we're not getting the abundance to the right people. There's things in the way. Then I'm thinking, like, what about all that, like cancer and stuff like that, all these horrible diseases? We're trying to get cures, right? Yeah. But we need, and then all the TV's always about, we need money for the poverty, we need money for the research. And I'm thinking, as an 8-year-old, like, this thing called money just seems to keep getting in the way of big breakthroughs, isn't it? We can cure them, we just need money for the research. Or we can feed them, we just need money to grow the food, to deliver the food. And I'm like, well, why don't you just not use money? Why does money need to be a thing? Why does money need to be... And look, would you try to argue with an 8-year-old over this? Of course you're not. But you'll try to argue with me at this age, and this is what I try to tell people. Kids have the simplest solutions to the biggest problems because they're simple solutions. We're going to get into the whole topic of, but you need money because money's what brings all this, or who's going to work if there's no money. Trust me, if there's no money in the world and someone doesn't want to work, you just watch and see how long that person lasts without working, or without anyone working for them. They're not going to survive, they're going to die. Then they're going to get after freaking arse and realise that unless they pull their weight, they're not going to have a house, because that house needs to be built. And you need to build a house to survive. You don't build a house because you get money. You build a house because you need a house to survive. Why do you grow food? Not for money, to survive. You go to work to survive. That's how it is. But obviously, we live in a world where evil exists. And evil doesn't do good because it's right. Evil will do good because they get a reward for doing right. But my point of saying these are the things I was thinking about is I was thinking about these kind of things like deeply at a young age. In eternity, like forever, I would think about that, although not in the way I would think about it now. Like, I can think about it in a more full way. You can't ever comprehend it fully, of course, but I'd think about it in a more complete way now. Whereas when I was 8, I would just think about like just being aware, like just being like I'm being aware forever. And I'd be like, well, this is all going on in my head. Even putting it into words is difficult. I'd be thinking like, I've been here for 1,000 years. Oh, how long left? Oh, forever. Wow. And then you think after like 100,000 years, it'd be like, I'm starting to get bored now. I'm running at house today. And that's the kind of understanding we have of eternity, is based on time, but it's the complete opposite. There's no time, so we can only perceive and comprehend eternity based on our experience of time, which is why we'd think it would get boring, but actually it's the absence of time. It's infinite, so we don't really get a true grasp of it. However, since knowing God, He's given me a different kind of take on it, and it's a really interesting one. Like, it definitely changes that dread of thinking that you've been there for 100,000 years and you'd be bored. Like, well, no. But yeah, so yeah, so I move about a bit through foster care, and then when I'm approaching the kind of age of 16, I'm with my last foster carer, and I'm only with her for a few months or something. And to be fair, it was one of my best ones. Like, she was the first one to let me go out, you know, with my friends. I had a drink, you know, on fireworks night. You know, I didn't drink too much. She was like, you just keep, if I text you, you know, all that kind of stuff. I loved that. And just meet me back at the train station, I'll come pick you up, you know, at 9 o'clock, blah blah blah. That was fine. So I really appreciated that. But I'd always said to myself and to some social workers that when I was 16, I am out of there, man. I'm getting out of that system. And then when 16 came, just packed my bag and I left, and I went and moved in with my pal, and I stayed with him for maybe 2.5 years, stayed on his couch. And looking back, would I have done that? No, I would have stayed with that lovely woman that opened her doors to me. Because you know, I was going to college, and I was getting freedom in a way where I was still getting the boundaries. You know, it wasn't just opening the doors and let myself loose. And yet, when I went and moved in with my pal, and I really liked the boy, he's, you know, but when that happened, it just opened the doors to, you know, drinking, smoking, and I just went crazy. You know, before that, I'd maybe drunk once or twice. That was it. Probably once. And after that, I was drinking every week. And I would get into some states, and I would get into fights, you know, and I would start, you know, meeting up with girls. I'd start just being obsessed with, you know, relationships and texting and gossip and partying and music and buying things for myself and clothes, and I got into crime and stuff like that. And that's when I'd say my life went downhill. In terms of when I took full control of my life, that's when it went downhill. And you've got to remember, I didn't really have social relationships up until I was 16. I'd never went out after school with friends and stuff like that. The only time I'd done that is if I was in army cadets. Don't get me wrong, that was fun and I met people, but it wasn't the same as having a set group of friends and you went out and you done different things and you met up with other different people and all that. I didn't have them kind of friendships. I didn't know that, and then when I first started doing it, I'm drinking all the time, taking drugs and stuff. Well, no, it wasn't hard drugs at that time, it was just like maybe weed. But yeah, so that's what ended up consuming me. And then I left school, I tried college, left college, went back to another college, then I left that college, and then I done like a course, then finished that course, then done some like work experience, left that, and then maybe when I was about 18, I'd done like a bar course at Cameron House, you know, got like bar license and stuff like that, and then fell out with my pals that I was staying with at the time. You know, I decided I'm probably just going to go down, ask my mum if I can go down and stay with her. So I did, and my mum said yeah, that's fine. So I went back down to Ayrshire, and I began staying with my mum. And looking back at it, I don't agree with it, man. I don't agree with what I've done. I don't agree with how I've done it. I'm really disappointed in myself, because I was really only using my mum as a last resort. And I should have taken into consideration the fact that even if my mum says yes, maybe that's not even what she wants, because my mum's the kind of person, like, she doesn't want to say no to me, you know what I mean? And I was just so selfish, so self-absorbed, that I wouldn't even have thought of that. I was just like, yes, oh cool, you know. But it was great to see my mum, and I was an alcoholic at the time, so I'm drinking all the time. I moved in, I get a job straight away, you know, like the next month, start working, last a few months, then I leave that job, then I get another job, and I only last a few months in that, because I begin to experience something I've never experienced in my life, at least the way I have, social anxiety. Now, I would say I've always been an anxious person, but I don't mean it in the way where, like, it's a freaking illness or a disease. I've never experienced that way. Like, I always knew, like, I'm not going to be the person, unless it was at a party and I was drunk, like, pure shouting and that, like, oh. I was the kind of person that was just going to be sitting, you know, maybe talking to someone and all, you know, all that kind of stuff. But that was just a kind of consequence of me not being socially active and not having all that experience with people. That's what that was. And so I began experiencing something like social anxiety, and I didn't understand that. I didn't like it. It made me feel really different, and I always felt freaking different in a horrible way, you know, growing up in foster care. But this just was so uncomfortable. So I'd be at work and I just couldn't talk to people, and I didn't know how to talk to people, and I just felt like I was taking on too much. So I stopped and I left, and after that I was like, I can't go, I'm not getting another job, I can't do that. So then obviously the only other option is you've got to go on the brew, and that was it. From there things just went really bad. I just, alcoholic, you get worse. Drugs started taking all different types of drugs, you know, having sex all the time, having a porn habit as well, which is, like, looking back now, I can't believe that I actually thought that was a good thing, or it was normal. Just because everyone does it doesn't mean that it's normal or that it's okay. Like, if everyone's jumping about murdering people, it doesn't make it okay just because everyone's doing it. And I'm not equating it with murder or that, I'm just using that as an example. And so it gets to the point where I'm living myself, and I end up, obviously the anxiety came and the depression came just after it, and it just got worse and worse and worse until the depression became worse than the anxiety, which would have been difficult because the social anxiety was really difficult. But I started, like, being, like, really suicidal to the extent where I barely spoke to anyone. You know, I didn't want to tell anyone about this. I just wanted to die. I just wanted to not be there. And it's not because I didn't want to be alive. Like, I wanted to be alive. I wanted to be having friendships. I wanted to have a job. I wanted to have a family. I wanted all this stuff. But I physically and mentally could not do those things that I wanted to do. I could not have a job. I could not sustain a job. I could not sustain my own mental health. I could not keep relationships. You know, I couldn't do all this stuff. So I felt trapped in an incapable vessel of doing the things that my heart wants to do. So that's what made me more depressed, and I'm like, I just want this to be over, man. Like, I really do. And it got to the stage where, you know, I'm researching ways to kill yourself and stuff like this. And I'm sorry for, you know, people listening to this and it's all so dark, and I'm really sorry, but I'm just trying to give you a real kind of idea where I was at this point in my life. And my goal was to find a way to kill myself that involves no pain. You know, I wanted to die, not be here anymore. Why? Well, because I felt like as soon as I die, the pain's gone. You know, That's it. And one thing obviously that I contended with is, what about your mum? What about your brothers and that? What are they going to feel like when they find this out? And I think about that all the time, and I promise you this, all it done was make me even more depressed. Like, we say this stuff about, well, they're so selfish because, they're not thinking about other people. Do you understand, in trying to bring someone around from suicide by saying think about your hangies, see if they're genuinely wanting to kill themselves, I promise you they're thinking about that all the time. They're thinking about, how can I do this to my fucking family, and all that's doing is pushing them closer to suicide, because it's making them feel more helpless, more guilty. I don't see that's not going to help anyone. So my thing was like finding some way to die where it's not going to be painful. And the best thing I'm not going to go into action. I don't want to promote any sort of freaking suicide, but I found this way that basically it was like I was like pardon me, sorry if that was pure loud because it makes you. But this was like perfect, This was like perfect. When I seen this, I was like, that is it. That's the way. And then it's funny because that was it. And I'd went and sourced all the things that I needed, and it was cheap. It would have cost like £60 to £80 to get all the things that would have needed for this. And I actually felt like this will be a good way to do it. And then by chance, which obviously later I'll understand is not chance, but it's just how God works, just this random thing on the internet, because there's very few things about this, was just like medical report about the dangers of this thing, and it was really scary. Like, I was reading this and I was going, well, it was like it looked like it had been a report done by hand and then scanned in as a document and put on the internet. I just randomly found it, and I was reading it, and it just freaked me out. It was like, that's how easy this thing can be effed up, and I could be brain dead like forever. And I'm not talking about hanging myself or that stuff, just in case. It was a weird way that's uncommon, but yeah, so that scared me out of that. But at the same time, that absolutely crushed me, and it made me sink into this just despair, man. This is why I didn't want to give my testimony, because I can't actually describe to people what it's like. It doesn't. It just me talking about this, like it doesn't, and it's sad because I don't want anyone else to feel like this. But sometimes we need to get to that place. I don't know, but so I'd accepted, I was a coward. I can't do this. I actually can't kill myself. I can't do the one thing that I need to do. What a coward. So now I'm going to just live. I'm not going to be able to get a job. I'm going to be an alcoholic, druggie, probably going to be in the streets. I'm going to be this, that, the next thing. And so I accepted, well, that's it. Just need to get on with this crap. And then, no idea how long, couldn't have been too long after it, maybe weeks, a month, I'm sitting on my couch one day, and bear in mind, I've never once in my whole life had anything supernatural or even seemingly supernatural happen to me. I've watched shows, and I was interested. I loved horror movies and all that stuff. I used to fall asleep with horror movies playing on the TV, all that, I loved horror movies, but I never had anything supernatural happen to me, ever. And I'm on my couch one day, and I'm completely sober. I'm just sitting there, and I was watching a show, and it was a Frankie Boyle show. I don't know if it was like his tour of Britain or something, and he was basically in a hotel. I don't know if it was in Scotland somewhere. He was staying in a hotel, and it was on the Virgin box, and I'd recorded it, so I was playing through the recording, and I just thought, I'll like listen to some music. So I paused it, and I took out my phone, and I had Bluetooth headphones, and I went and I put the Bluetooth headphones into my ears, and then I heard all this static, like, and it was just weird because I was like, I've not connected, I've not turned these on, connected to them yet, have I? And I looked at my phone and I pulled down the notification bit, and the Bluetooth wasn't on, so I'm like, what am I hearing right now? And I started to really pay attention, and it freaked me out because I could hear outside my window. I was right at the window, the couch was right at the window in this flat. I could hear right outside seagulls, like, make noises, like right outside the window, like not literally right outside, I mean like they're obviously flying by and on like roofs just across the street. And then in this in the Bluetooth headphones, I heard these seagulls, but it was like 3 seconds later, and I kept just listening and listening. And I remember thinking, what I'm hearing in these headphones is like a 3-second delay. And I remember my mind just saying, right, either this is just a delay from these headphones, or there's someone listening in this local area that's about that far away, or something like that. But all these weird things came from my head, right? And so I wanted to just pass it off. Trust me, I was looking for something to explain it away. And then I could hear like breathing, and it's not my breathing, because I would stop breathing and hold my breath, and it would be fidgeting on a chair, and I just knew something was weird, something was wrong, something was not right here, and it began to really freak me out. And as soon as I began to get really scared, I began to feel myself just kind of freeze up. And the more I'd done that, I was still, the whole time I'm paying attention to these headphones. And it was weird because I just knew that this, whatever this was, it wasn't trying to hide from me. It wouldn't talk, this person or whatever wouldn't talk, but they also didn't, because if they didn't want me to know they were there, they wouldn't have a microphone there, and the only way I would hear them is if they've got a microphone. You know, unless it's something even weirder than I've comprehended. But so they obviously wanted me to know they're there and be scared. And I just remember I began saying things. I started saying, what is it? What do you want? With my mouth. And my eyes just glanced right over to the TV. This is, that's so weird. My eyes glanced right over to the TV where I'd paused it. And it was on Frankie Boyle's hotel room door. There was a, you know how you can get the wee signs that you put on the door handles? It was a sign saying, be quiet please. And I just looked at that. My eyes just glanced over to it and looked at it. And I was like, what the... And I was like, in my mind, I just started talking and I said, okay, what is it? And the more I'd speak, the more my heart started palpitating, and I got really scared until I couldn't move. I couldn't speak in my mouth. And I just get more scared and more scared and more scared. And the more scared I got, the more I felt like myself giving into something. And it was really freaking me out. And I kept asking, you know, what is it? What do you want? And eventually it got to the point where I felt like I'm dying. I'm about to die. And then I started thinking, I'm about to give in to something. I'm not thinking that specifically, I just knew that I was giving in to something. And right as I was about to give in to something, which I presumed was fear, and I just knew in that moment I couldn't escape this thing, so I'll just do whatever you want. There was just this tiny bit of light in the right hand side, and I was consumed by this fear, man. So like everything appeared dark, even though I still had my eyes open. There was just this bit of light with my eyes still open, this bit of light in the right hand. And then I just seen my mum's face, and she was just smiling. And as soon as that happened, it was like the fear was still there, trying to do whatever that was doing, but I just completely, my attention was taken and seeing that, and I just felt so happy. And I just felt, it was like in that moment I chose to identify with that, which was love, and I felt love. And as soon as I felt that love, it just completely dwarfed all that fear that I just felt. It made that feel like nothing. And right then I was like, I am not giving up, I am not giving in. Like, I didn't even understand fully what had happened, but I was like, I'm not giving up. What, you think I'm going to let go of my relationships with those that I love. I don't think so, even though I just about to was. But I didn't realise what I was giving up. But anyway, that happened. And I just knew in that moment that something happened between God and Satan, the devil. I don't know what. I still don't have a big idea to this day. I believe that it was a fight for my soul, but I don't know the ins and outs, and to be honest, I've not actually really asked. So that might be why I've not got an answer, because all this stuff's happened since. And so I stood up right after this. I stood up, man, and as soon as I stood up, I remember feeling like really young again. Like, I remember just feeling really young and really light, and I was like, whoa, what has happened to me? I can't explain it, but in that moment, what had just happened, pardon me, all of my social anxiety and depression that I'd just about given my life to, pardon me, had gone. Just gone. And I was like, whoa, like God had taken that from me. All I wanted to do in that moment was go outside, just go a walk. And this might seem like cool. I had social anxiety to the point where I didn't like going out during the day. I didn't want to go out. I didn't want to be in public. I'd go shopping at 1 o'clock in the morning when it was dark at 24-hour Tesco or Asda when it was quiet and nobody was about. I wouldn't even empty my bins because I didn't like going out. I wouldn't answer my door because I didn't like opening the door. Like, that's how bad it was. And if you could see my house, I actually abandoned that house at one point because it was just that, it was just, you'd think somebody died in there, and I was about to. And so I didn't know at the time what had happened to me. I just knew that God had done something. Unfortunately for me, after this happened, I didn't read the Bible, and I didn't. So because I didn't read the Bible, I didn't find out what had happened to me. I just knew God had done something. And unfortunately, this world, there's a million gods. There's infinite gods, and they've all got different rules, and they've all got different this and different that, and so I never actually found out what happened to me. Because the truth is, there's one God, and there's one mediator between man and God, and that's Jesus. Anyway, so after I felt like, I was young again, and you can't describe like what that feels like actually feeling like you're a young boy again. In that, not that you've still got all the knowledge that you do, but you just feel like, I don't even know. Remember that when you'd wake up when you were young and you just wanted to go outside and play with your friends and have fun. You weren't worrying about anything. Just that feeling. You think that you can't get that again. And I in fact, one of my favourite songs before that was what was it? Was it Chris? Was it? Who's Chris Jones? So I don't know. Is it Young Again? Is it Will We Ever Feel Young Again? That was one of my favourite songs, and it really used to get me because I was like, I would love to feel young again, but obviously it's not possible. It is. And anyway, so what happened in that moment, as well as that, was I had new desires and I had new thoughts. I no longer, and I was an alcoholic at the time, I didn't want to drink alcohol. That is so weird, man. Like, that's not normal. That doesn't happen. That's not normal. I didn't want to drink alcohol anymore. I didn't want to eat junk food. I didn't want to watch horror movies. I didn't want to have sex. I didn't want to watch pornography. I didn't want to, like, it was so weird, all these things I was feeling and thinking, and I didn't understand. And if I'd only read the Bible 3.5 years ago, I wouldn't have suffered anymore. And it was interesting because, and there we go, I missed that out, the experience in LSD, but I'll put this in a different video. I had a thought at one point that says you don't need to suffer anymore. And after that experience, I've suffered again, and I've thought, why would that have been such a profound thing that you don't need to suffer again? And but yeah, because I didn't understand all this and I didn't grow in my knowledge of what God wants me to know, I've slipped back into it. I became, dependent on alcohol and sex and stuff like that again. All this. Some things haven't come back. Like, I don't like horror movies. I don't. To be honest, I don't really know. I don't really know why that one's the main one. But the point is, it's not like I went back to feeling the same way that I was. Like, for example, I wouldn't have an issue with drinking before. I wouldn't have an issue with having sex. I wouldn't have an issue with doing all this stuff. But now I do. Like, if I do them, I feel bad. And it's not like I'm forced to feel bad. I just feel bad because I know that it's wrong. I know that it's causing damage. I know that it's not right. And it's interesting because only recently did I begin reading the Bible, and the Bible literally says that in order for someone to enter the kingdom of God, which is heaven, they need to be born again. Jesus said that. Jesus says over 2,000 years ago that someone to enter heaven needs to be born again. And then have an experience where God does something in my life, takes away all my burdens, all my trauma, gives me a new lease of life where I feel like I've been born again, literally. Like, that is God fulfilling His promise and His testimony in my life, in me. And that's why I want to share this testimony. Because it's important, because God's saying that you need to be born again in order to enter the kingdom of God. You think, well, why do you need to be born again? How can you be born again? Well, the Bible says that flesh gives birth to flesh and the flesh dies, but the Spirit gives life, gives birth to the Spirit, and the Spirit is life. So when you're born of the Spirit, it's not the same birth as the flesh. And likewise, how we don't have any say or action in our birth of our flesh, we have no, we don't have any doing in the birth of our in the birth of our spirit. It's God that does it. God gives us a new spirit. So see, when I'm born, and I don't really want to go into a tangent on this video actually. Right, and so the other thing about my thoughts and desires, the Bible also says, I will put a new spirit inside you. I will give you new thoughts and new desires, so that you will do the will of God. And so the Bible is actually prophesying, saying that when you're born again, the spirit that you're given, that makes you born again, will give you new desires and new thoughts. Why? Because these new thoughts are centered around God. They're centered around Jesus. They're centered around the things that last forever. Whereas my thoughts beforehand were centered around things of the flesh. How can I satisfy my flesh? How can I satisfy my boredom? How can I satisfy my desires? That's all things that are, selfish and destructive, and they'll pass away. But the desires that God gave me in that moment were things, of love, of joy, of peace, things that last forever. I didn't want to eat junk food because that's for the now, for my body. I didn't want to watch horror movies because that's satisfying some, dark bits of my heart. I didn't want to watch pornography because it was just, it actually freaked me out, a lot of the things that, and see, the weird thing is, most of my intelligence came from that experience. I mean, not that actual experience, not that I came out that experience and boom, I had all this, no. From that experience onwards, God has shared so much wisdom with me through His Word, through reading the Bible, but also just questions. And this is what I was going to say. For most of my life, I believed that I had questions. Well, I did have questions. I believed that I actually wanted the answers to them, and I actually just realised in that moment and moving forward that I didn't. And it's so scary because most of us believe that we've all got questions, but most of us believe that we want the answers, but we don't. And the proof of that is God has given us most of the basic answers we need in the Bible, but we reject it. And we can reject it for whatever reason, but we're still rejecting the truth. So it's like, we wonder why evil's happening in the world. This is one that I used to have. God's answered it. In the first book of the Bible, He tells us why evil exists. He tells us how it came about. He makes it clear that He didn't create evil. He tells us how evil came about. And He also tells us that right after it came about, that He planned to get rid of evil. And I would tell this to anyone. I promise you, God has the answers and He wants to share them with us. But see, if God wants to post an answer through your letterbox, how can He do that if you've drilled it shut? And what I'm trying to show here is, if you've got a closed heart and a closed mind, you can go round to say you want the truth, but you don't. If you want the truth, do what I do now. Just rip the letterbox off. Just say, God, I want to know what you want me to know. I want to know I want to know the truth. And I'm open to anything, even if it hurts. Because sometimes, and that's what I say, the truth is going to hurt us, especially at the start. If you've never known God or Jesus, the truth will hurt you at the start. Just be prepared for it. But I promise you, see, after you get the initial bit out of the way, the truth will hurt less and less. I promise you. What will hurt more after that is seeing the world through the eyes of God and not through your own eyes. You realise that God's actually the only thing that's doing the right thing. The only one that's actually got the best intentions of every single person and thing at heart at the same time. Even me, I thought I was a good person in my heart my whole life. And only through knowing God I realised, oh no, I wasn't. I'm judging myself by my standards, which are low. And I didn't realise how low they were. And so, my point now, and the reason I share my testimony, is because we've got a God, our Creator, that loves us, like really, really loves us, to the point where He actually died and gave His life for us. And you think, and look, this is what I was saying 5 minutes ago. If you've got a question about something that I say, I promise you, I've probably had the question and got the answer. Like, I'm a human too. It doesn't sit well with me, the fact that, God apparently sits back and doesn't help the creation that He created, even though that He's meant to be a God of love, and that He wouldn't send people to hell if He was a God of love, because how could you love someone yet send them to hell? Trust me, I hated God for those reasons too, if He did exist. But now, Him sharing why all this happens, it makes so much sense, and trust me, it makes more sense than this world does, and the world's going to get more confusing as time goes on. But God doesn't change. That's where we find true peace. And I make other wee smaller videos where I try to kind of, describe some of the things that are hard to understand about God. Like, well, how can Jesus be God? Why does evil exist? What is the good news of the gospel? And because people struggle with these things, and I've struggled through them, but I've managed to, accept the truth from God, and I try and share that with people to help, unlock that in people's minds, and hope that people can come to that realisation themselves. And yeah, see, I've done this, and I don't even feel like I've really scratched the surface, man. But hey ho. So yeah, let's say right. In fact, I may as well do that. So pause this a wee second. Right, so I don't know how helpful this will be. I just really hope it will be helpful for some people. So obviously I've just shared kind of the chunk of my testimony, but understanding, good, evil, sin, heaven, hell, all this stuff, it can be so difficult. But so often we hear people will, especially if you've grown up around people that went to church and stuff, they might say something like the good news of the gospel, and no one wants to hear it. And that should set a red flag up to us, because say you're my friend and you come up to me and you say, I've got some good news. 10 times out of 10 I'm going to go, oh, what is it? Because I'm interested in hearing it. What good news you have. But for some reason, when we mention the good news of the gospel, people really don't want to hear it, and it's because it's been muddied. When we hear the gospel, we don't hear good news. We hear we're going to go to hell. We hear we're bad people, we're evil, and we're just not interested. But understanding, why is it good news? Is it really good news, or is it a lie? It's important. So I've just kind of wrote this wee thing, and I'm going to try and hopefully help you to understand it a little bit using just a kind of an analogy, just a simple analogy. So what is the good news of the gospel? I'll try and simplify it using an analogy. You might have heard at least one point in your life the good news of the gospel. Unlike most other good news, it probably does not entice you. Is it really for you? Is it really good? We have a lot of misconceptions about it due to how it's presented to us. I being one of those who never truly understood it for most of my life. Let's say I show symptoms of a disease, but I actually don't have any knowledge of it, or the consequences. I was born with the symptoms, so if I ever became suspicious, I just passed it off as being human. And to set the kind of context for this analogy, I have no knowledge of the Bible, and I do not intend to. It's old, it's boring, it's controversial, and it's filled with incomprehensible things, so why would I? But yet, at the very same time, someone somewhere else has taken the time to read the Bible. They have discovered some horrific and then wonderful news. They have realised that the symptoms that they have had their whole life, that they believe, just like me, were just part of being human, actually related to a deadly disease. So they read and they discover that because of this disease they will die. And contrary to the old cliche, death is just a part of life, death is not God's intention. So this person meets me and they inform me that I also have these symptoms. I tell them, I'm aware of them, but they're nothing serious and it's just a part of being human. They begin to explain to me that they are part of a deadly disease. So what are these symptoms? Anger, frustration, jealousy, pride, hate, resentment, fear. And I'm sure we can all add in other ones, symptoms that we notice in ourselves. So the list goes on, and they can all be summed up with the word evil or sin. So sin is the biblical word for evil. So I asked this person, doesn't Jesus love me? Doesn't he just want me to have a nice car and nice teeth, a happy family and lots of money and peace? And then they tell me, Jesus wants you to live. And if you continue to live with this deadly disease, the likelihood of that happening will diminish greatly. I then tell them, it doesn't matter because I'm going to heaven anyways. I'm a good person. I am then told that there is no one in heaven who has any deadly diseases. There's no one walking around heaven who hate other people. And I'm thinking to myself, exactly, I can't wait to get there. They rest their hand on my shoulder, they lean in and they say, how do you think that you're going to get into heaven with a deadly disease? If you're quarantined for a virus with a 96% mortality rate on Earth, and the Earth is filled with diseases, hate and death, why would you believe that you would even be allowed to hover near the gates of heaven with a deadly disease? It gets me thinking, this is quite uncomfortable. I suddenly don't like this idea that I have a deadly disease and I can't get into heaven. Surely this isn't true. I would be lying if I said that a bit of panic was not kicking in. So I go back to my last resort and I tell the person, I'm a good person. They tell me that the Bible also addresses this. It says that no one is good but one, and that is God. And it sounds right in theory, but surely there's a good human. I'm then asked if I know anyone who has never lied, never stolen, never had an evil intention, they've never lusted, they've never been selfish, they've never been jealous, they've never been angry or frustrated, they've never swore, they've never dishonoured their parents. The list goes on and on and on and on. So I just cut him off, and obviously I said, of course not. Everyone experiences them at some point. So I'm asking this person, is that why people hate that book? Because it just tells us how sick and evil and twisted that we are, and that we're all going to hell because of it. I can totally see why most people stay away from it. But yet I realise that this person is not panicked. They're not frustrated and they're not angry like me. It stirs my curiosity. So I ask them, none of this bothers you? You are okay with going to hell and reading a book filled with hate and condemnation? They smiled at me and they told me with a smirk, that's just the thing. Let me explain it to you in another analogy. This is an analogy within an analogy, so this is someone in that analogy using an analogy to explain to that person. Okay, so that's just the thing. Let's say I went to the doctors to get results from a scan that I had, and the first thing that the doctor said to me was, in my hand I have some good news. With a serious face, the doctor invites me into his office, and over the next 5 minutes the doctor began to tell me that I have a severe and deadly illness. He listed everything from my symptoms, scans, the reports and the results. None of it was good. I just kept thinking to myself, I am going to die. This is it. What am I going to do now? It horrified me. But at what point do I get up and walk out of the door? I don't. I stay in my seat and I ask the doctor, did you not say that there was good news? And the doctor began to smile and he told me, the good news is that we have a cure for your disease. In that moment, my horror and fear and anger turned to pure joy. But this is how it is with us today. We are told by the doctor, which is God, that he has good news, which is the gospel. But in the gospel we also read about our deadly disease and the consequence of it, which is death and hell. God needs to first diagnose us and inform us about our deadly disease, just the way a doctor has to with a patient. Instead of holding fast to what the doctor revealed to us in the beginning, that there is good news, a cure, most of us hear the diagnosis and forget the promise of the good news and cure. We are horrified, angered or scared and will walk out before we even hear the good news. The cure for our deadly disease is Jesus Christ. See, I'd never had the gospel presented to me in such a way where I actually realised that I needed a cure. I never realised that God's law is perfect because He is perfect, because His kingdom is perfect, and consequently so, the entry requirement is perfection. By failing even once in my whole life breaks perfection and renders me incapable of getting into heaven. Sin or evil has ruined that, but God promised a saviour in the first book of Genesis, so that when we read the rest of the Bible we know that He will provide a cure, and He did in Jesus. So this is what literally changed my whole, it revolutionised my mind and my spirit when I understood truly who Jesus is and what His purpose is. Like, I used to think I was a good person. I had stole, I had lied, I had lusted, I had blasphemed the name of God, I had dishonoured my parents, I'd taken the name of the Lord in vain, that's blasphemy. I'd broken all of God's laws. and yet I still believed I was good. Like, and the Bible says every man will be fast to declare his own goodness. And it's so true. If you ask a person, are you a good person? They'll say yes. All we need to do, take someone through the 10 Commandments. Have you ever lied in your life? Yeah, who doesn't? But let me put it this way. See if I'm in court, say I'm in court for lying, okay? Just theoretically. Pardon me, sorry for burping. Theoretically speaking, the judge says, do you plead guilty for telling a lie? I'd say yeah, but who hasn't lied? Does it matter that anyone else lies in my court case? No. What matters is the fact that I have broke the law. If I'm in court, it's not about what other people are doing, it's about what I've done. I'm not in court for the group, I'm in court for me. If I steal, if everyone in the world steals, and then I'm one of them that steal, and I go to court for that, and I say, but everyone steals. You're not, the judge is going to say, I'm not punishing you because everyone else steals, I'm punishing you because you stole. And the evidence that we're gathering in your case is the evidence against you stealing, not everyone else. So likewise, when we stand before God and say, yeah, I've told a lie in my life, but who doesn't? That's not going to, that doesn't get us out of court. In fact, that only shows it's actually arrogant. Because when I see that I've broken God's holy law, I've not only broke man's law, I've broke man's law many times, been in court many times, but when I realise I've broke God's law, God is perfect. Human law is not perfect because humans aren't perfect, but God's law is perfect because He's perfect. He created me, He gave me life, He gave me my mum, He gave me my brothers, He gave me every breath that's in my lungs. He created the flower, He created the eye from scratch, He created the nerves, He created love. The feelings of love. I know we say we make love, we don't make love, we share love. We don't know the first thing about it, we just experience it. God created it. And to know that I broke His holy law, there's nothing worse than that. So, the way I see it is, heaven is God's house. See, if I want to get into God's house, I need to know what His requirements are. God's house is perfect. There's no death, there's no suffering, there's no pain, there's no fear, there's no hate, there's no jealousy, there's no pride, there's no arrogance, there's no ignorance, there's no lying. It's perfect. So it makes sense that in order to get into His house, the entry requirement is perfection. That means I can't get in. That means any human that is truthful and honest with herself will know that they can't get into heaven, because you need to be perfect. And it's not like a trick, because to get into a perfect place, you need to be perfect. To get into a place like earth, you don't need to be perfect because it's not perfect. Right, so, for example, on earth, evil exists, death and suffering exist. So the laws that we need to live by here are not perfect. How do we know that? So, for example, if I want to murder someone, if I desire to murder someone in my heart, but I don't do it, I can live here, and that's not a crime on earth. That's fine. But if I want to get into heaven, even if I desire to hurt someone or hate someone in my heart, I can't get into heaven now, because heaven's perfect. The Bible says God judges the heart, whereas man looks at outward appearance. So see, if there's evil in our hearts, that stops us from getting into heaven. So it makes sense that if you think back to my testimony, that God says you need to be born again of the Spirit to get into heaven. Why? Because if you don't have a new spirit, you're stuck with the one you had at birth. The one that we have at birth carries, inherits sin, which is evil. And evil can't get into heaven. So if we want to get into heaven, we need a new spirit. That spirit is given by God, His Holy Spirit, and that's what changes our heart. It's beautiful. So, and God is God, it's good, because it's not like God is saying heaven's a place where death exists, but you need to be perfect to get in. See, that's evil. Because He's setting the standard at the highest it can be, perfection, to get into a place where death is. No, He's not doing that. It's equal. The standard, the place to get in and the standard to get in are equal. If you want to live in a place where there's no death, no suffering, no pain, the entry requirement is perfection. But this is the sad thing. This is where we need to understand that by God's standard, not man's standard, by God's standard, our Creator, we're not perfect. We can't be. Even lying, even lusting. Look, Jesus said, you've heard that it said, you shouldn't commit adultery, but I tell you that whoever looks at a woman to lust for her has already committed adultery with her in his heart. And I can testify to this firsthand, that I've had dreams where God has literally shown me why that's a law in his kingdom. I've had dreams that are surreal, where I've murdered people in my dreams and I've not understood what's happening. I couldn't stop, and God showed me. Remember when you read where Jesus said in the Bible, you've heard that it said you should not murder, but I tell you that whoever hates his brother is a murderer. And then I've had that dream and I've went, whoa, God knows things that we don't. He can see that when we hate someone in our heart, that's doing harm that we can't see. And that's why he gives us a law. Why did God say in the beginning in Eden, don't eat from the tree of knowledge between good and evil? Because he could see what we couldn't. He could see that if we done that, we would die. I just want to scream, man. I really just want to scream. God is so good, he's so gracious, and he doesn't want any of us to go to hell. To the point where we actually deserve hell. Look, I've already broken God's law. I've lied, I've stolen, I've cheated, I've lusted, I've hated people. So I've broken God's law. I'm guilty. So see, when I stand before God, I'm guilty already. The law shows me I'm guilty. So I'm condemned to prison, and God's prison is hell. But God doesn't want me to go to hell. He loves me so much that he thought, I want my children to be with me. I want my creation to be with me. But he can't, because God is holy and just and perfect, he can't overlook crime. He's not going to turn a blind eye to it. And trust me, we're all the better for it. We don't want God to turn a blind eye to sin, because some people will say it, and I used to believe it, but isn't God love? Won't he just forgive me? This is why we need to know the gospel, people, because God has forgiven us. God has shown us mercy in Jesus Christ. God's display of mercy and justice are both displayed in Jesus, because Jesus was perfect and sinless, unlike the rest of us. And yet God didn't even spare his own son, Jesus. And why did he not do that? Because he needed justice to be fulfilled. Because he can't let crime go unpunished. So for my crimes, Jesus died. So that on Judgment Day, I've accepted Jesus' sacrifice for my sins. Because if I pay it, then I go to hell. And this is it. Either I pay or Jesus already paid. So the way to truly accept Jesus is by realising that you need Jesus. Realising, why does Jesus need to die? Because God is holy and just, and crime needs to be paid for. And we're all guilty of breaking God's law, and Jesus paid the fine for us. That's how much God loves you. That's how much God loves each and every one of us. But we can also choose to deny him. We can choose to deny Jesus, deny his thingy, and then we'll stand before God and we'll have to pay for our sins. And this is what I try to show people. It's not all supernatural. That's what I try to do in the videos that I make. I try and show people you can witness God's glory and God's righteousness in our world. If I steal in this world and I stand in front of a judge and I say, oh, can't you just forgive me? What judge will let me walk out the court for that? They're not going to. They'll say, look, they don't need to, but they can choose to forgive me, but they're still going to say, look, you've committed a crime and I need to uphold the law and deliver justice, which means you're going to have to pay for that, pay for your crime. It's the same with God. You can't walk into God's courtroom and say, oh, but you're all love, can you not forgive me? God is just and holy, and if humans are just and holy, yes, humans are imperfect at it, but we still have the standard where we're just and we're holy, crime pays. God is perfect. No one gets done by God. God is fair and just. But this is a really long video, and I maybe doubt that people have really watched a lot of it. But I appreciate your patience, and I appreciate your time, and I hope that it helps you, and I hope it inspires you to seek Jesus. I would advise anyone to read the Bible, and if anyone needs a copy of a Bible, I'll be happy to send one to you. I've got a few spare ones, and and some gospel tracts as well. And if you've got any questions, feel free to ask. And I would urge you, if you're going to try and read the Bible, start in the Gospel of Matthew in the New Testament, and honestly read that. It is absolutely beautiful. It's inspiring. It's eye-opening. And if you're going to seek God, don't do what I've done for most of my life, and what most of us do is chap God's door and run away. Chap the door and wait there and expect God to answer, because think about it, if God is real and you knock his door, say if you come to my door, will you run away and go, oh, he doesn't exist? No, if you're coming to my door knocking it, you know I'm there. Treat God the same way. We're so in and out. You need to go all in. God's either not real, doesn't want anything to do with you, Jesus is a lie, all that is crap, or God is real, he is who he revealed himself to be in the Bible. And if that's true, you need to get to know him, because without him we all perish, and that's just the truth. We die in our sin. But if it's true, then the news of the gospel is great. It is good news. God bless you. Thank you for watching.